Hello, adventurers, and welcome to another of our the Zulu's D&D streams. We were not here last week because we were in the midst of a one-shot extravaganza. If you weren't able to have your young adventurers join, that is okay. There was an immense response. We were very happy with as sort of excited as everyone was for it. However, we realized that we have a knowledge that we would like to impart to you, our delightful viewers. Let's see if I can make my words. So today what we'll be discussing is creating a one-shot, what goes into making them, running the one-shot, and sort of how that differs from a normal campaign or a normal session. Joining you, as always, is me, Rob, one of Zulu's DMs. I am joined, let me see if I can get it right, below me is Jason, and then to my other side is Alex. Go ahead and say hey, guys, while I fix my name.
Hello. Oh, yes.
Hello, everyone.
Yes, we are all DMs for, or game masters for Zulus.
Yeah. Just got done with a crazy week.
Although we are willing to play other games.
Yeah, and last session we got to have a discussion about Cyberpunk Red. I would love to be able to talk a little bit about the sort of beautiful artifact that is West End Games' Star Wars RPG. Reading through that thing, it was originally printed in, I think, 83, and it is such a fascinating time capsule to see how the book is written, and how that sort of reflects the time as far as people's understanding of pen and paper role-playings go. But that's not what we're here for today. Today we're going to dive into creating a one-shot adventure, and I think we should begin by defining our terms. What in the world is a one-shot adventure? I'm not going to ask Jason because he's middle of a drink, so Alex, how would you describe a one-shot adventure?
Well, it's a one-time thing where you're playing as new characters or you're playing as old characters in a separate side story. It's not necessarily always going to be connected with the main campaign that you're running with, or it could run right alongside with the main campaign that you're running with. I know for me personally, I actually really enjoy the fact of, like, if I have a lot of missing players, but I still have players who want to play, then they'll go through a one-shot where, yes, it does tie in to the regular campaign and the story to, like, kind of reward the players who show up, but it doesn't hurt the other players that maybe they're too busy with something and so they can't make it a week. So it's like, hey, we're still running, but don't worry, nothing in the story is going on. It's totally fine. They're just getting a little bit extra detail.
So that, I'd say there's two types of one-shots from what Alex was saying. Like, here's your basic, which usually they're good introductions to a system, so you don't have any commitment. So you usually have pre-made characters because that'll take up time. You have a specific time frame you're going to be taking place in. Like, we have 3 hours or 8 hours, whatever the game for, the time frame of your one shot is. And you're trying to fit in a complete story, unlike a normal game that kind of just keeps going. You multiple sessions may go in branching out in ways you didn't expect. Typically, a one shot is going to follow, it's going to come to have a beginning, middle, and end because it's one session. And like I said, and the other thing was Alex mentioned was kind of one shots. Maybe not everybody shows up. Maybe you wanted to show another aspect of the game world or story from maybe a different perspective. I've done weird things like that on occasion. My phone went off. So that's that. I would say that those two is like in a set game world, and then the complete one shot. And like I said, best for new players because it gives them that like toe in the water of feeling like what role playing is. Sometimes it's just that's as simple as it, or what the game system is.
One of the things that I've found very useful in one-shots, especially with new players, is the fact that it's much lower stakes. So you can try something new and not have to worry about the sort of lasting consequences. So you're like, I want to try playing a fighter character, and then you discover fighting is boring as all get out. I want to play something else. So it's a good way to sort of dip your toes in, so to speak, with low stakes. Also, if your character dies, it's going to be a relatively short amount of time anyway. So, Alex, you were going to say something? Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, you only commit 2 hours to it. Like, you only commit 2 hours to this character versus, like, weeks and weeks and weeks on end with another character that you really, really value.
So
Yeah.
it's actually a good thing that you mentioned time. I think your normal sessions, I feel like, the length of time that you use for, say, a normal session versus a one-shot can sort of vary on it. Because you are trying to make the entire thing self-contained, where you have your beginning, middle, and end in a single session, sometimes that can lend itself to a slightly different play style. In the past, I've done 4-hour one-shots to be able to get a little bit more sort of meat into it. But time restraints and that sort of thing really depends on what you're capable of doing. So I would say when planning out your one-shot, the very first thing you need to do is figure out how long you're going to be playing in it. Are you going to be doing 2-hour session, a 4-hour session, a 6-hour session, or if you're young and full of energy, 12 hours. It's been many years since I've managed to survive through one of those, so I wouldn't recommend it. You tend to have people's sort of level of concentration waning. Also, at that point, you're preparing for a much more significant thing. So we're going to go ahead and say that your one-shots are going to be between 2 hours and, let's say 4, kind of as the top end. 6 hours is entering into slightly different territory, and we'll maybe talk about it if we have some time later. But speaking of preparing, Jason, what did you do to begin to prepare for this particular series of one-shots? Also, for clarification, while we did do, each of us did 4 sessions over the course of the week, it was essentially the same adventure every week, just with different players. For clarification.
Yeah.
So
Rob had one adventure, I had another. We all wrote our own, and Alex did yet another. So for my preparation, the first thing I kind of did was I kind of came up with, I knew it was going to be winter themed because winter. Yeah. And so I started looking at, I like using folklore and mythology, so I started pulling from that and, seeing what I could do. But the very first thing I did was actually made the pre-generated characters that the kids would choose from.
Okay.
And figuring out what level. For me personally, I made them all 3rd level. Because that's kind of where you get a feel for, like in D&D, you get the subclass. You're not too complicated. If they're new players, they can still kind of figure it out. If you're higher than that, it's going to get confusing. Our idea is a little confusing, but and the other thing I did was I maxed out all their hit points so they wouldn't have to constantly rest, especially if they're wizards or the like. And I gave them all healing potions. Variable depending on the amount of starting hit points they had. That was for me just because I didn't want to have a lot of rests, because explaining short rests to new players will take you another half an hour. It gets very confusing and choosing what to roll and odds and stuff with kids. With adults you could do it, but kids it's a little bit harder. And so that was my main focus. Was I was kind of looking at what would my hurdles be. And that, like I said, that one for me was one I thought of was that. And the other thing I wanted to figure out was how do I need to know that it could delay at any point in my adventure and create it kind of modularly. So it could, if I had a half an hour left, what do I do to crunch that? If it should have gone, different pace to kind of squish it down or create, like my first encounter was escaping a collapsing tunnel. That has a specific time frame. So I knew it would only take X amount of time. And there was a, evil reindeer chasing them. But yeah.
I'll be honest, that's pretty fantastic.
Yes. The pain deer. So
I love it.
Pain deer.
Yeah. So so that was kind of and some NPCs and stuff like that. But the main thing was like I had to look at and I also, one of the other things I did is just particular to my pre-generated characters is I didn't make any straight spellcasters other than the cleric. I created split class. So they were all warlock, wizard, or warlock sorcerer hybrids. So they had more spell slots. And if they did take a short rest, they could have got some of their spell slots back. I also distinctly went with ones that would get a lot of cantrips because that way they never had nothing. They weren't stuck with, I only have 2 cantrips. And
out of curiosity, Jason, how many characters did you pre-generate?
I'd have to look, but I think I did 8.
Okay. And your group sizes were 4 and 5, so you had a little bit of wiggle room for what they could choose from. I like it.
What did you do for your pre-generated?
So actually, it's funny. I started out with the story as opposed to the characters first, and in many ways, the story was what informed how I created the characters. Well, kind of. So I wanted to do just a village of people who each of them sort of had their jobs. So I didn't. For the most part, I didn't give any of the characters names or even really refer to them by their class, but rather by their occupation. So I started out with the librarian, the blacksmith, the locksmith, and locksmith. Oh, and the priest. So very simply, that was the fighter, the rogue, the wizard, and the cleric. Just went with the good old-fashioned classics. And for the first one, I actually only had 4 players, so I only made the four characters for them to choose from. But also built into that, I wanted them to kind of be a little bit more powerful. Most of the kids that I had, I have been played in with games before, and a lot of times you'll start kind of lower. And I was like, you know what? We're gonna throw them into the deep end. We're gonna see if they sink or swim. So I made them all 5th level, and I gave them all a rare magic item. And the way I did it was the first person that chose their character was the last one that got to choose the items, because I had a small pool of items that I would allow them to pick from that generally fit within each of their things, but then at the same time also, like, it was, I think, 5 different weapons, 2 different cloaks, and an animated shield. Because it's one of those things where a lot of times the kids really like playing with the powerful magic items, but, you know, they're expensive. I think for a rare item, you're looking at between... I think it's 2d10 times 1,000 is what I use for cost for rare items. That's a pretty significant chunk of change. And so I thought it'd be fun. This would be a good opportunity for them to use particularly powerful magic items. And then from there, it became more of a question of what kind of interesting looking spectacle could I create? Because I wanted to be very visually interesting, much in the kind of how Alex's table is right now. I wanted to present to them very, very sort of pretty and interesting things to look at, and then they could play within that sort of playground. So I, for the first scene, I ended up doing in the town. So I built a couple of buildings. I filled it with all my little bits and bobs that I think we showed in one of the previous sessions or episodes. I just realized I'm peaking a little bit, so I'm going to turn that down. Sorry. It's fun of producing in the middle of talking. I made the different houses using the warlock tiles. I filled it with all kinds of interesting stuff. I had the models picked out, and I made sure it was the pretty ones to go with it. I also went a little crazy with the races. I ended up having a fire genasi. The priest was what are those things called? A Goliath. There was a silver dragonborn, a turtle. The second 2 that I made were the farmer and the hunter. The farmer was a monk turtle, which I thought was hilarious and delightful. So it was kind of different races thrown in there to be able to play them, and then they got this sort of powerful magic item. And then from there, it was creating interesting scenes. I have an adult white dragon, I want to say, which I knew was a little bit powerful, but so I was like, how can I make this dragon usable at 5th level? So that sort of worked in that one, yeah.
I think I'm using it, right?
Say again?
Oh no, I've got it. Yeah. So right now he's going to terrorize the Kingsguard in their luxurious capes.
But yeah, that was sort of my going into it. My idea for creating this adventure was, how can I make these sort of relatively powerful characters, but within reason, and then also how can I make something that's visually very interesting, because me just bragging at them for a couple hours didn't seem as much fun. You can kind of get away with that with other things, but for this one I was like all spectacle all the time. That did come back to bite me later. But Alex, what was your sort of process going into this?
Well, it was a winter theme, and when I think of winter, I think of snow, and then when I think of snow, oh, snowmen, let's go! So I designed a whole adventure of just like, basically the kids are like, they're fighting snowmen. I had 3 different sizes of snow people show up, but essentially, I actually based my adventure in the homebrew world that I normally run all of my games in, way up in the city, way up in the northern city, by the name of Brightwood, run by the founder and mayor, Ander Brightwood. And I really tried to hook them into the story of, you are in the city of Brightwood. Keep in mind, you are in the city of Brightwood, with the mayor, Ander Brightwood. Really drilling into the fact that this is Brightwood. And then a little bit later, or once they show up into the city, Andrew Bright was like, "Thank you for the call, adventurers. Now, please help me figure out who is summoning these strange monsters." So I gave them a couple of options to start interrogating some people. And since I was running with, I ran with some younger kids, but I also really wanted to be super silly because it's the one-time shot. Got to make sure that they have fun, right? I gave 3 different suspects 3 very different personalities. They were very, very certain, it was very easy for them to figure out who the culprit was, but then they fought 3 different sizes of snowmen. And if you want to spotlight me real quick, I can go ahead and show off a little bit of some cool stuff that I was doing. So I'm up hiding in the corner over here. And then I've got some super giant snowmen. These are actually some of the miniatures of the characters that fought the giant evil snowmen. I really wanted to make sure that they had a very massive size difference and to really get them into the mode of like, you are fighting against snow people. I literally was, I would have a giant snowman show up, even though these giant snowmen are quite literally like 7 times the height of the humans or of the people that they were fighting. Now, they also got a special adventurer to help them out, and his name is Ander Brightwood. So I didn't want to make him too powerful and the characters too powerful. I actually chose for the kids to be, I pre-made the characters to be like level 3. I also only made 6, but they were all a different class. I only chose 1 class. That's a really smart idea, Jason, for having them multi-class. But since there was so much action happening so quickly, and I was rolling really badly for the snowmen to actually hit the players, so there was no need for them to ever rest at all. They were just action all the time, and they survived. Things were great for them. Not necessarily for me. They figured out torches are the snowmen's #1 weakness.
Yeah, I didn't actually mention in mine, like I did have the idea first because I had recently gotten a bunch of styrofoam. And so I built an ice cave to actually, I can kind of grab it in a second, but I also put Christmas lights through to be ethereal winter mist lights that were floating through the cave. So as they went in, they had to like, they had to break through they were higher. So sorry, I kind of got ahead of myself. One of the things I wanted to mention was one of the things I learned very quickly was in my first session, I actually had it scripted out that they would be introduced and gain the mission from somebody. And I realized they spent a lot more time than I wanted them to talking to the NPC. So all the other times I just did it with, you've been hired, you are here, this has already happened. Because that first time, like they wanted, it was just great. They wanted to talk, and so there was a CEO of the Happy Joy Toy Company that wanted him to find out what was wrong with Grandfather Frost, the stand-in for Santa Claus, and it was that he'd been corrupted by like a Belsnickel or Krampus, and so he was going to do a Nightmare Before Christmas and give all of the naughty kids a very naughty present that would attack and destroy them. Yeah, as is the way in folklore, the whipping and taking the bad kids. So they were stopping that. They were hired by a toy company to do so because they got death threats. Whole other thing. But yes, yeah, so they got to save Christmas. But like when I was building that was my first thing was I happen to have this big thing that I'm going to paint up and do as a as a cave where they enter in, and then a Santa's grotto. And then once again, and then the workshop where he had mind controlled a bunch of gnomes to build these horrible presents.
Not elves.
I like gnomes better just because I had them be rock gnomes tinkering. Because they were devices like teddy bears with claws that would attack. So they were offered right away presents from Grandfather Frost.
Yeah,
and it's funny because even when they learned they were bad, a lot of the kids would want to open them because it was an unknown thing. It's like, maybe this one will be good. And I'm like, they're all bad. They're bad. And it was like, there were just like, there were race cars running over people. I happen to have little miniatures of like cymbal clapping monkeys, that kind of thing, just getting attacked. All the while Krampus is telekinetically flinging gnomes as missiles at them.
So real quick, you mentioned something I found very fascinating and true for me, and I was wondering if this is also true for Alex. A lot of the times, the things that I chose for the kids to be fighting against, I ended up picking because I had very representative models. During my sort of regular sessions, on occasion, I will end up picking monsters because I think they're appropriate for the situation and they're interesting. And then I will sometimes have to use sort of stand-in models because I don't necessarily have a half dozen bugbears, but I do have a half dozen sort of generic humanoids with shields and swords. But I found in this one, I really was leaning towards what models do I have that could be very, very sort of fun to have on the table. So did you find that was true? Like, you made snowmen, which I think is delightful. And if I remember correctly, and I don't know if you were doing it just now, but yeah, they can come apart, can't they?
So this one definitely can. So when they like decapitate a snowman, since it's made of snow and it's not a person, they can literally decapitate the snowman.
And now he's
and turn his smile upside down.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely found that was what I was kind of leaning towards for these ones, because I feel like when it comes to sort of a regular session and a regular campaign, it's very much that sort of narrative that you're building, and in many ways the progression of a character. But because this is a one-shot and these characters are sort of being handed to them, they do their thing and then dematerialize into the ether. The focus has to go from, progressing a story and sort of being able to have that development, and more turns to sort of a different direction. I also noticed, Alex, you mentioned mystery, and Jason, do you happen to have the snow cave nearby, or would that be a real pain to be able to look at?
While you guys are talking, I'll go set it up.
Okay.
I have it right over here.
You knew that we'd ask to see it when you mentioned it, the awesomeness of it.
I looked at it,
right?
I should have pulled it out, but yeah. Let me.
Yeah, you're good.
It's just the crazy me where I'm like, oh no, I want to show off the styrofoam that I made. Like, check this out.
Yeah.
So yeah, and this one definitely you can decapitate this snowman, but you can't really like disembody him because I needed to use like some paper clips to actually keep them together. So while there were still many parts that were flying around.
Some of them weren't necessarily on purpose.
Oh yeah. Oh, I mean, also I had some kids in my first session who were just like, hey, can I burrow into the snowman? And so I'm like, heck yeah. And so they literally were digging into the snowman and shoveling his guts, which I just used a bunch of this like cotton balls, just being like, you spilled the snowman's guts.
Yeah.
Like, it's a very kid-friendly way to be really gory because it's just snow.
It's snow. Yeah.
It's just snow, bro.
Well, and you mentioned something I found very interesting and I found very true of one-shots is more often than not in a one-shot when someone's like, I want to do this weird wacky thing, like dive into the thing there was something... Oh,
dig a vertical tunnel? Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, Gabe at one point was like, I'm the farmer, so I want to summon my goats. And I was just like, sure, yeah, you've got goats. Because, like, in a long campaign, part of the fun of it, I feel like, is trying to figure out, okay, how many goats do you have? Where did you get them? How did you call them? There's all these questions that I think are very interesting and can be sort of exciting to answer in a full-size campaign. But in a one-shot, I was just like, well, I've got 3 goat models, so bleh, there they are. Your goats attack. Get him.
Oh, gosh.
But yeah, like, and I really enjoy that sort of thing, especially when kids have these ideas of like, oh, I would like to do, like, right now, one of the kids in one of my games needs the Holy Avenger. So they've been diving into the Dungeon of the Mad Mage, which is a giant pig to run, but they're diving into the Dungeon of the Mad Mage with a singular focus of, I will find the Holy Avenger. And they've now gotten to the 4th level, which I've mentioned that it's on the 4th or 5th level. They've gotten to the 4th level, and he's like, I have to scour the whole thing.
Gosh.
So, but at the same time, when he does finally get the Holy Avenger, it will feel really good because he has this sword he's been hunting for all this time. But in a one shot, you do not have time for that. In fact, one of the things that I have discovered in the past, I did a one shot as a birthday once, and I was like, all right, so they're gonna, they were like, I want to do this sort of Curse of Strahd sort of like spooky sort of thing. I'm like, yeah, awesome, let's do it. So in my head, I was like, ooh, Dr. Frankenstein, because I have a miniature of a flesh golem that's like a bunch of things all knit together. I was like, this is great. And I was like, okay, so they're going to start in the jail cell. They've got to get out of that. I'm going to give the rogue his tools, so it'll be easier. But then also they can look at the guards. They can sort of rile them up, and they'll open the door. I was like, all right, cool. From there, they'll have these doors that'll lead to these rooms. And I was just going off my book of maps, and I was like, which maps look interesting? I'm like, okay, so they can either go down the hole through the sewers into this area, and that will lead to the graveyard, and then the graveyard can lead to the main thing where the doctor and his monster are, and then if they go the other way, they'll get to the library that's full of books, and that'll probably be like, I don't know, some attack books or whatever, and all this stuff. And then they spent 2 hours in the jail cell doing a fight, doing all this stuff, and I was like, I can't. And I was like, all right, all the stuff in the middle, gone. The hallway from the cells leads directly into Frankenstein's area because it's going to take the next 2 hours for them to get through that as well. So it was, and originally it was only supposed to be 3 hours long, and it was a kerfuffle, but we managed to get through it. And Jason actually touched on this a little bit. I think one of the things that's very essential for planning out a one shot is a level of modularness to it, like being able to sort of change the length depending on how quickly they go through fights. Like part of the reason I had my last one actually ended about 15 minutes early. Well, where the other ones ended, this one ended a little early. Just because they were rolling so well and just doing massive damage, and they just murdered all of the things. And I was like, well, it was going to be an epilogue, but the death of the dragon causes the wizard to show them their true self, and they're gaining necromantic power and are now trying to kill you. But that's the thing I think that's very, very important for understanding in one shots is the length of time it takes is going to vary in the same way that, like, you might think to yourself, oh, well, this adventure is going to, this thing will take them 5 or 10 or 20 minutes and it ends up taking 3 hours. Or you're like, okay, this next 3-session arc I have, oh, they figured it out in 2 minutes. Great. You can exactly sort of wiggle around with that a little bit in a full-length campaign because there's a lot more wiggle room, but in something that is very much that sort of the story arc of inciting incident, rising tension, climax, descending, if you have time. Most of the time you don't. Then you really need to be able to make sure that you can sort of be more sort of flowing with that narrative. And then, so Alex, did you find yourself making those things in your one shot? Did you build those in, or was that something that you ended up doing sort of on the fly?
Yeah, so what I was planning on doing was for the first encounter, they were going to run into this smaller snowman. You see, he's got a smiley face, so he's not really that bad. Well, once they defeat that snowman, and I realized that they defeated that one really, really quickly, then they go to snowman level 2. And so he's got 3 sections, and he's got the angry face. So, he's not a good guy. You gotta defeat him. Oh, and Jason's got his dog to join us. But then, once they are out into the middle of the forest, trying to figure out who was the one who was summoning these crazy monstrosity beasts, well, then we've got the biggest, the baddest one of the bunch, the giant snowman. And I actually had a little extra piece of cardboard to stick into this one's neck so that the enemy could literally be on the shoulder of the snowman, which I think gave kids the inspiration to start climbing the snowman and just dig right on in. So I'm super stoked about that. I'm also just kind of like, well, there's snowman number 1, snowman number 2, and big bad giant evil snowman number 3.
Nice.
So I guess the question is, had they taken a very long time on the first one, would you have skipped just directly to the third one, or would was there any way that you had sort of built in that sort of variability and time to it?
So I definitely had some of my groups, they just they did it, and it took the entire 2 hours for them to defeat all three snowmen. Another group actually was able to defeat the snowman with like 20 minutes to spare. So I'm like, guess what? You're having a holiday themed party in the city of Brightwood to celebrate your success.
I like it.
Oh wait, no, you got to go do something else because one of those suspects that was not the actual one, he turned out to be a bad guy too. So watch out. Then I had another one where they definitely had a crazy adventure because they only defeated two of those giant snowmen because they could have sworn that the biggest problem was the mayor himself. So they went on a manhunt to destroy the mayor, and they did.
Oh boy.
One shot. So why not make it? Why not make them feel like super epic and powerful?
Yeah. Now, Jason, I feel like you may have the mouse. You may have built for us your thing.
Oh,
do
yeah.
we have a camera set up for it?
Yeah. One thing is I have my grass mat out because I did not want to dig out my snow one. So let me go ahead and show you. So
Okay, we can have a green. We can have a green Christmas.
So here was like the entrance to the cavern.
I need a pin. No, I did it wrong. Jason, I made you the host.
All right, so I'm going to make my
host now. I've pinned you. All right, so this is the entrance to the snow cave?
Yes. So this is the entrance. I normally there's snow and stuff. It's mainly because these trees have bases. So I would put this little bit of snow. I put a lot more out than I normally would just to coat the bases so it looked blended more into the white that was normally out. And this is the snow. As you can see, it's lit because let me go ahead and go over here. As they would go in, there is a wall, and they would have to burst through the wall as this thing started collapsing. They would be locked in. They had to go forward, and there was things happening there. So it would be they had a time limit, and I would let them know they had a minute, and so that's 10 rounds in D&D. So they're trying to figure out how they could climb over it, they could burn through it and melt it down, whatever it was, because I could pull out chunks from it, And I also was rolling every round for rocks to fall down, which I just use regular rocks. As you can see, I didn't really clean up. And then later, from the top of the glacier they were inside of, the reindeer would start streaming in, flying around. They had, yes. So there you go. They're flying there. And they had to make it through that entrance out there. And I usually would just box in my views so that they wouldn't see that they were, just Christmas lights. But yeah.
Oh, cool.
This was that, and then they would move through here to a grotto. So my first encounter was kind of a moving as quickly as possible to get through. And they would try and fight the reindeer and then realize they could take one out, but then when they'd see like 6 more starting to try and get their way in, it was like run. And then they ended up in a grotto that had that was a gingerbread houses and stuff. I don't have that stuff ready to show, but so they would go in, and there was a logic puzzle for the next part. And this one you could go through. It was cookies, so they could just shove the cookies in their mouth till they got the right one and watch the horrible effects that happened to their friends when they ate the wrong ones. So they didn't have to the kids that didn't want to be patient, they would just and then they could enter into the workshop with the secret code cookie basically. And that's when they ran into first I had a Santa miniature. He's a druid from something or other, but he, a bluish, like a old Europe form of Santa. And then when they could beat him down, and then the Krampus would escape, and they would have to fight him, where he tries to freeze them and all that. And it was a pretty simple encounter. The other thing that I'm gonna go ahead and shift back to myself. One of the other things, I'll put my lights on again in a second, is that I feel it's important to have an ending that's kind of rewarding to a one shot, because they're not going to get to play these characters, but you can give them whatever you want because they're not going to be playing them again.
Yeah.
So I gave them all, if they saved Santa or Grandfather Frost, they would receive a present, and in it was a wind up doll of themselves. that they would wind up and they could command it to do whatever they wanted. They loved it, and they could see through like it's a familiar effectively.
That's cool.
But it was just like the cool. You saved Christmas. Here you go. Here's your present. You're a good child. Yeah, mainly because throughout the whole fight with Krampus, all they're hearing is "You are just so naughty." Well, naughty, because he's pretending to be Santa. But yes, yeah, that was a lot of fun. Was the whole coming up with taunts from Santa.
Dang.
But I'm going to flip my lights on because it's very dark in here. Ooh. I needed it for the Christmas lights.
Well, yeah, of course.
All right. And turn it off. But yeah,
Hey,
so that was my setup. And seeing the, I just had that from a thing I'd ordered, and I was like, this is, simple. So it worked out.
Jason, one of the things you mentioned when you were kind of earlier on was getting things started, and that sort of having them start with getting the mission from the person tended to bog things down a little bit. And that's actually one of the things that I definitely would like to, I think we should talk about a bit, because starting a one-shot is a very interesting sort of thing. A lot of times when I run D&D games, I like to give the players a lot of, what is it called? The thing where you get to control the stuff that you're doing. Agency. There we go. I like giving players agency. Letting them decide what their character's doing, how they're doing it, what they're doing. I don't generally, when they're going from scene to scene, say, and then you go from scene to scene. I say, do you want to go to this other place? And I found that is a terrible plan with one-shots. Especially by the nature of you need to get it started and get it moving. I've generally the sort of first session or two can be kind of slow. It can be plotting. You're discovering your character yourself. And in a one-shot, you don't have time for that. You're just in the action. You're going. Things are happening. So for and actually the other thing that's even going to be before that is for character creation. I mentioned a little bit before that I let people decide which of these sort of pre-made characters do you want to play, and then essentially once they pick the characters, they got their item. I gave them a little bit of background. I was like, you were in the city of Hagara, nestled in the far north mountains of the Forgotten Realms. You are currently in Frostbane, the local tavern, talking about your last adventure, which is where they got the magic items. Anyway, and then immediately they jumped into combat. So I didn't really give them a lot of time to sort of just like, we're going to hang out and have fun. They're like, no, we're doing combat. You're rolling initiative. Let's get after it. So how did you guys approach your since Jason last one, whoever would like to go first, how did you approach distributing your characters, getting people there, and then sort of letting them know how the mission began?
All right.
Well, I know for mine, when I was sending out the Zoom links, I actually had a whole kind of prepared idea so that they would know what they're getting themselves into. So it was basically, Ander Brightwood has a call to action. Please help the city of Brightwood, so that they already know ahead of time what they're signing up for. And then in terms of assigning characters to each other, I was just kind of like, well, what class do you want to play? I got these extra classes prepared. Cool, here you go. And then just handing it to them that way, and then starting off the adventure being that they would meet with Ander Brightwood, and he would say, thank you for coming to my aid that I have sent out for help. And just really tying it all together that like they were called upon to get help, or they were called upon beforehand, so we don't have to spend any time during the session to be like, oh no, you're getting a message. Just so then they could go straight into the, hey, we're assigned to help you. We gotta go help you.
Yeah, like I said, my first time, I thought I had kind of an amusing like opening where they met this weird like dwarf that was going to hire them, and he ran a toy company and explaining that he was getting threats from Santa, and so that concept was kind of funny, but it led to too many like, let's investigate this, and it was fine. I like, no, I needed to just get you going. They were going to be teleported to Frosthold, which is the place where the North Pole, effectively, by these wizards. And I just went, no, you're right there. boom, you're already been teleported, gave you the backstory. Here's what you're signed up for. You're going to get this much money. Because like negotiating prices was another one that would be get bogged down in. And yeah, that was that first one. And it just, you learn as you go. But one of the things about picking characters that I had was I was kind of first come, first serve. Except for I had a huge variance in when people were showing up. So that would always stink for me because like I would be explaining what the classes were because I had quite a few that hadn't played before. And so kind of going through, what kind of character you want to play. And, it's like, and so one of my sessions had an 8 and a 10-year-old, I believe, that, or 9, I'm not 100% sure on the ages, but they'd never played D&D before. And so I knew that I had to be a lot more careful with like explaining why I was doing stuff. I couldn't just go roll the dice and they'd understand, obviously, but they were surprisingly good. But yeah, there was a lot of challenge. I just go first come, first serve and try and get it moving. I first thought I was going to let them choose their races too. That was a mistake because I thought I'd just hit the race button and they would go. But, when you can weigh 3 different options, even if it's just simple, it's options. And you have to go, oh, is this one better this way? And I'm like, oh, yeah, no, never mind. I'm just assigning the races, because,
Well, and that was kind of what I ended up doing with the magic items, because I was like, creating characters is a long sort of involved process, and they're even within the races you have decisions and all that kind of thing. So for me, what I ended up doing to give them the feeling that they were going to choose, but then also dealing with the whole first come first serve kind of thing was again that thing where if you picked your character first, you got your item last. There was a small pool that they could choose from, and they were relatively easy to explain. I think it was the Scimitar of Speed, the Dwarven Thrower, which is an amazing item, Animated Shield, Cloak of the Arachnid. And what's funny was, for the most part, they used them a little bit, but not like a lot. But it was still nice to have. They're like, ooh, I got this cool item.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I was actually surprised in mine. In that ice wall they had to go through, if they went through the right section, because obviously I had ones that were different. 3 of the groups found it. There was a hidden magic item in there, but none of them figured out there was magic. They were I said it was a gold tinged sword, and I was like, I'm waiting for it's going to be a firebrand, a short sword firebrand, and it would have been super useful. None of them tried to figure it out. They just went, it's money, whoop, and I put it in my back. And it was like, I even had a thief steal it from the other player, and they didn't. I was like, when is this going to, I was even going to let them just accidentally have it light up. They say the right word at the right time type thing. And they never wielded it. I was like, oh, okay. All right. Oh, there you go. Yeah.
For me, like, I didn't give them any magic items, and there was not really a chance for them to get magic items, except the mayor who was helping them in the very end had a cool glowing sword where he could point it at an enemy, and then it would cast fairy fire on the snowman, so then they would have advantage and really just beat on the gigantic snowman. Well, my very last group, they really liked the fact that he had a glowing sword, and they were like, oh, I want the glowing sword. So that was kind of an adventure of where they only defeated 2 of the snowmen and the mayor. Because they wanted the sword. And I'm like, oh, no.
But I feel like one-shots are great for that, though, because then there's no stakes. In the same way that them as players don't have to feel like, I've done it wrong. You as a DM can just sort of be like, I don't know, some stuff. Let's see what happens. And like, you don't have to worry about 3 sessions down the road, someone being like, but you said this. And you're like, I did. So I did. You can you can realize that like this monster was way too hard or way too easy. Let's get 30 more of them right now. And for those of you listening, I would definitely recommend one-shots are great for both players and DMs because you can go nuts, try different things, get weird. When players suggest off-the-wall things, say yes, because it will create fascinating things. It'll do a couple of things. It'll first let them feel like they have that agency, which is always fun, but also it offers for you as the DM an interesting challenge where you can try to suss out how you would make it work. So in general, Jason, We're doing the thing. There's a dragon you're fighting. What weird thing do you want to do to fight the dragon?
Assuming it's a fire dragon, I'm going to summon water and try and shoot it in its mouth.
Okay.
Yep.
So then, presumably, you're a spellcaster of some sort. So I'll make you use one of your spell slots, provided you still have them. And then I would have it make. That sounds like a Constitution saving throw versus your spell save DC. So I would roll that. And I'll give it disadvantage on its next attack because it's been blasted in the face with water. That's just the first things that pop into the old noodle, because the thing to always remember when you're dealing with stuff like that, have them roll a d20 or have them use their spell save DC, because the d20 can be your friend. I had at one point one of the characters like, I want to get on top of the dragon and attack its wing, and I was like, mechanically that is not a thing that the rules are built for. But I was like, you know what, screw it, it's a one shot, and that dragon happens to have its wings able to fall off, and I think it crit as well, because like, I don't know what was happening with the roll dice with friends, but it was out of control. So he did like 40 some damage. And I was like, yeah, no, you lop a wing off. Now, I wasn't planning on having the dragon fly around anyway, because trying to deal with flying creatures is a giant pain in the butt. So I was just like, yeah, no, you hop on top and you lop its wing off. Let's do it. Let's get weird. The whole thing with the goats, I was like, let's look up what goat stats are. And ultimately, it was one of those things where, had he just punched it because he was a monk, he would have done massive amounts of damage. He has like a +7 to hit. He does a D6 or something like that for each of his attacks, +3. He has like 4 attacks and he can stun with them. He uses his action to summon goats. They have 1 attack each. It is a +3 and does a D4 +1 damage. So ultimately, the goat summoning, less effective than just punching it in the mouth, but it was also very fun and interesting. So I was like, yeah, no, let's get weird. Let's see what it does. And I think that's really great. It's a low stakes sort of thing where you as a DM can try to sort of run things on the fly, because by the nature of how a one-shot works, you're going to have to adapt to the weirdness. It's going to be weird. It's going to be not what you expect. You'll either prepare too much or too little, and then you'll be left with like, I have like 3 more hours of content. We're at the end. So then you have to try and figure out how to wrap it up. So we're gonna say,
on my first session, I told you it went on too long at the beginning. So of course they got to the grotto, and I was like, oh, we have half an hour left. Like, they're supposed to find the cookies and do that. I'm like, okay, all right. So I'm sitting there thinking, and luckily I had a greedy player who helped me. And they go into a room and there's 7 types of cookies, different shapes and all that. And there's a riddle. And he's like, I just steal all the cookies. And I was like, oh crap. Like, the other players weren't where he was. And I was like, all right, well, how about the Krampus Santa Claus is annoyed by all the cookies being taken, and he explodes out of the fireplace I had in the room, and that last fight then takes place in the grotto, because I only had half an hour, and it was like, all right, this will work just fine. And that was like total, like, I got kind of lucky that the player just, I was like, they're never going to get through the logic puzzle, because they were kind of puzzling through everything. It was like, well, luckily somebody tried to circumvent it, and then having the whole house shake and stuff, and it was like, So.
I really do think that one shots are almost they're a great opportunity to really practice your improv skills. What sort of weird things did they throw at you, Alex, that you had to kind of adapt to on the fly?
Are you talking about for like the holiday one shots or the winter themed one shots, or do you want to talk about one shots in general? Because I've got some crazy one shot idea potentials. So essentially, I have this group. They're called the Death Guard because they wanted to be like special members of the Kingsguard and blah blah blah. But they have this one character. He's a crazy old man where he's a whole bunch of crazy magic happened. He's actually supposed to be like 20 years old, but time magic just works weird on him. So he's like 140. Okay, and he's just crazy. He whenever he casts magic, he's got this special item where it basically makes him do a custom wild surge every single time. So, because I like the craziness and just the hilarity that ensues with this character, I'm like, oh, you know what? Maybe he's also this accidental, all-powerful god where when he goes to sleep, there's this special realm that opens up called Thaben's Dreams, where literally the wackiest things happen. And I explain to players, like, oh, you're having Fabe and Death Hunter go to sleep. Well, looks like you're in trouble. And so like they have just these crazy wacky adventures where it's kind of what I do for like one shots where like, oh, I need all the players here, but I have some players who are not here, so we're gonna do a Faven stream. And some of the players just absolutely love it. I literally had one of them be like, well, can I try and have like 3 cousins show up? And I'm like, heck yeah, roll an Arcana check. And he rolls an Arcana, he rolls well. Guess what? There's 4 of you cousin that are around. And he's like, I'm going to make 40 of me. And I'm like, you can do that because this is a weird extra dimensional plane outside of existence because this is a one shot. And when Fabian wakes up, it's not going to be true.
I remember also. So you guys had a one shot because when this madness all began and we started doing the online D&D, you guys had a very sort of specific storyline that you were moving through with all the groups, and I remember because of some disjointed natures, you needed sort of a filler, and the one shot that you made was they played as orcs from the orc army, correct?
That is correct. I did actually have some orcs, and there was also another group where I used that idea because there were some players that are always constantly able to make it and some players that weren't able to make it. So they actually ran those orc characters twice, and their second time actually affected their real characters. Like each time that I ran a session with those orcs, it was to propel the story for the other player or for their actual characters. So like with this particular group, the first time they ran with the orcs, the orcs stole a noble that the other players needed to like save or whatnot, or that the other players were like messing around with. The second time they played with those orcs, they freed a big bad evil monster that is now on the hunt for those players and he's trying to destroy them. But you know, he's just a really big orc.
I like it.
Like massively big.
Well,
another example. Another example that we did was for Halloween. I ran using a different system just because we normally do. I have a D&D that we run with some of the employees on Sundays, and I wanted to take a break from it just because I was kind of not burnout, but we've been doing a lot of D&D, and so there's a game where you use a Jenga tower called Dread, and running that was a one shot, and I had to figure out a way of timing that one out, and that was an interesting one. And also, like, I didn't want
real quick. I feel like the Jenga tower and the difficulty with timing should be explained somewhat.
Yeah. So in this game, instead of rolling dice, whenever you do something, you pull a tile from a Jenga tower and put it on top. The storyteller does not do that because it's just not, I force you to pull. Like if a monster comes after you, you have to pull a tile. If the tile falls, you are eliminated from the game. You're either killed or something. So you're out. And so it's kind of survival. You're trying to survive a horror movie or something. In this instance, it was kind of, everybody was playing themselves at Zulu's, and bad things were happening. And I had to, keep a mystery going. I had props and stuff. And we were just, it was timing it out. And so in that, I didn't know when it would work. When I had no idea when somebody was going to get eliminated. Alex was the first. Not the Jenga expert, but he as the character kind of floated around for a little while. And so anyways, we kept this. It was an interesting game, and it was a good, like, and it had innate, because I wanted to play a game that was kind of scary. And Jenga, Dread, the name of the game, with the Jenga tower, is intense because Jenga is stressful. And then if your character dies when you mess up and you're out of the game, it adds a lot of stress. And and you can choose not to pull, and then a bad thing happens to you. And so there's specific rules, but I even simplified it farther from the normal one. And because normally you have a character sheet and stuff, a little bit of things, but I wanted it to be as quick as possible and did not want to get bogged down in rules. Yeah. So, and that was a good example of one shot, and it worked. It ended fast. It suddenly ended, but it was
Everyone
great.
Just died immediately.
Actually, there was a component where somebody was a betrayer and they didn't know it, and that player got everybody else killed. So he
On
kind
purpose?
of won.
Yes.
Yes,
It was
he did it on
purposeful.
purpose. He locked them in with a gateway from beyond, and it was basically a Call of Cthulhu scenario using the Jenga tiles.
Yeah.
So he was a member of the cult, and the group didn't know it. So he was working against the group the entire time, slightly.
I feel like an important thing that we should bring up. We work under a very specific time restraint. We need to fit our sessions into very specific times. You, as a DM playing a one-shot with your friends, don't need to worry about that. So we make it sound like it's a very interesting sort of difficult sort of thing, and you will have to futz with it. I think having that time restriction actually can be sort of fun as far as like a creative sort of thing. In the same way that putting restrictions on yourself, I think, forces you, if the whole world is your option, then the analysis paralysis. But if you're like, I'm going to make a session that will be 2 hours long, then you have to really play around within a restriction, and I think that can be very fun. But that being said, if you're having fun and the players are having fun, you don't necessarily need to fall in that sort of very strict guidelines. The other thing that you mentioned, Jason, that I really liked was if you find that you're playing a game that you really like and you're really enjoying, but you're kind of getting burnt out or bored with it, or especially in these holiday seasons or just holidays in general, one-shots are great ways to be able to sort of revitalize a game, sort of revisit it, take a break from it so you can come back. So yeah, one-shots are I think, a very fun thing. I think we're about ready to wrap it up, but do you, Alice, do you have any final thoughts for us?
Well, I was about to like also add on that I know a long time ago I was actually playing it with some friends, and then we were like, okay, well, let's do a one shot. And that one shot ended up being like over the course of 3 different sessions because we were like, I mean, this is kind of fun.
Yeah.
I think we were like doing some sort of beach resort getaway, and I was playing as like some workaholic half-orc cleric where I'm like, oh, I'm always praying. I gotta make sure that I appease my deity and whatnot. But when is this vacation time? Because I had been sent away on vacation time because I had worked for too many hours. I had been too busy working for the priesthood.
It's too real.
I know, right? Can I get sent away on vacation?
Sure.
Taxes and accountants, the game.
Yes,
Rob, you
exactly.
froze up there.
Say again?
Looks like you froze up, at least on Zoom.
Oh,
no,
no.
it might have been my end.
Oh,
Am I back?
clear.
Can you hear me at
It's
least?
time to
Yeah,
dance.
I can hear you. It's
that's good.
kind of clipping, so that's
Yeah.
a good time to
Time
stop.
for us-
Yeah.
yeah, time for us to stop.
So I want to say thank you everyone for listening. If you have any questions, feel free. We've got, let's see if I can remember. It's this side. Nope. Still this side.
Nope,
Nope.
that's
Still
me.
the same side. This side. There
I
we
think
go.
that's me. There you go.
I'm going to get it eventually. Over here, there is, so zulusgames.com is where you can find all the information. If you go to community, you can find our Discord. Feel free to, if you do @employees, we'll all see that. Also, just below that, we have our zulusdnd@gmail.com. Feel free to send us any questions there. Also, comment on this. But yeah, we'll be back next. Yeah, we'll be back to our regular. This will be our new regularly scheduled thing. I need to futz with some calendar stuff to make sure that it shows us that we're going to be here regularly. Holidays are a mad time for a retailer, so hopefully we'll get back to some level of normalcy. Who knows? Maybe we'll be lucky and we'll continue selling all of the things ever.
But we will also be continuing our regularly scheduled Dungeons and Dragons online sessions.
It's true. So yeah, stay safe out there. Have yourself a lovely time, and we will see you next week.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.